Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn Spotlight session, one in a series of sessions that explore various topics in the field of domestic, sexual and gender-based abuse. I'm Sharon Gaynor, Training and Research Assistant with Haven Horizons. So today we're delighted to welcome Gillian Dennehy to talk about addictions and domestic abuse. Gillian has worked for several non-profits in the violence against women and girls sector for over 15 years in London and Dublin as a trainer, facilitator, project coordinator, service manager and frontline worker. She's trained a diverse range of professionals, including the Gardaí, the UK Police, hospital A&E staff and maternity hospital staff. She worked as a domestic homicide review manager for Standing Together Against Domestic Abuse, and she was also a member of the UK Home Office National DHR Quality Assurance Panel. She's the lead trainer for SAOL, Davina Project, and the Davina Project aims to bridge the gap between addiction and domestic abuse services and encourage collaboration across the sectors.
Over for having me today. Very excited to be here and talk about SAOL's work and Davina's work in particular. So I'm going to get started there now. I'm going to set a little timer for myself there to keep myself on track because, you know, when you're talking about two issues of domestic abuse and substance use, you know, there's a lot to talk about. So first of all, to talk about SAOL. SAOL is a very unique project. I suppose I would say actually one of the most unique places I've ever worked. It's its 30th birthday this year, and it was set up in the north inner east of community of Dublin, and it was basically set up as the first women-only addiction-specific day centre in Ireland. The community saw, okay, look, women are being a bit affected by addiction issues, but there's nowhere for them to go. No women-only safe space for women to go. And that's why it was set up. And it was set up with that education focus, which has stayed with SAOL throughout its 30 years. And it's evolved over its 30 years with this holistic approach to women's needs. So you see here, what I've shown you there now is a guitar with all little bubbles coming out of it, which was created by one of our women. And it's just to show you that creativity is a massive part of SAOL. Music, the guitar is a massive part of SAOL as well. Our women, the SAOL sisters are often invited to speak at different, to sing at different events. And it's all, you know, part of kind of that I suppose that community, that a connection that is built in SAOL, that, you know, there's more to you than your substances. And the different groups we offer in SAOL. So a woman comes in, usually it's a warm referral, you know, a trusted other professional, you know, will support her to access SAOL, or she can drop in if she wants as well every Tuesday to the welcome group. And you know, she can come from anywhere in Dublin or outside of Dublin, because it's the first women-only addiction-specific day centre, but it's only the second one now. And there's Jane's Place in Dublin as well, but that's it. The only specific day centres for women using drugs and using drugs. So the welcome group, women can attend for 3 sessions of that, and then they can access any of the other groups that are going on in SAOL. So you have the Seeking Safety, which is focused on the handbook from Lisa Najavitz. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Who's really interesting this program, and SAOL was one of the pilot projects to roll out the program, and it's really looking at the links between post-traumatic stress disorder and addiction. We've got the BRIO, which is Building Recovery Inside and Out, which is looking at the, you know, supporting women. It's a peer empowerment program for women who are at risk of the criminal justice system. Then we have Serious Group. I haven't even been allowed into Serious Group. It says what it says. Its name is on the tin and all that, but it's with the CEO of SAOL, and it's really about setting those serious goals for women in their life. You have the Community Employment Program, which is you know, what we say, it's, you know, recovery is your job. And, you know, women will do specific certificates and QQI qualifications, such as, you know, climate justice and recovery and well-being, things like that they're looking at. And that runs all year for, you know, term year. And I suppose for that, you know, women are expected to come in for certain times each day, and that, you know, that structure, regularity and social collection is really helpful for women in their addiction. And then of course we've Davina, domestic violence abuse is never acceptable, and I'm going to delve into that a bit more in a minute. And I suppose just to highlight there for SAOL, what I find really unique about SAOL is that trauma-informed approach. It's flexible, it's hospitable, it's welcoming, it's warm, and it's a safe place. In SAOL, it's a harm reduction approach addiction service. For those in DV service not really used to those kind of terms, what we mean by that is that no abstinence is required to access our service. It's a non-coercive, non-judgmental space. And it's working where, often in my previous role, I'd often say what Women's Aid, it's working where women are at. And it's the same with this harm reduction approach. You're working where women are at with their addiction, with their substance use, and with where they're at in terms of being their experience of domestic abuse. And I'm just going to share this little snapshot there. This is created by our head of services, Ray Dean, back in June 23 for a presentation she did. We're going to do a new one soon. And on that random day, just to give you a little insight into how SAOL works, 12 women came into the morning for group support and a bit of grub. Food's a massive part of SAOL. It's all about that trauma-informed approach. And, we find that, if women are fed, they're going to be able to concentrate more in the groups. They're going to have those full bellies. They get part, and it creates a community spirit as well. All the staff and the women sitting down for porridge, sitting down for the spaghetti mayonnaise for the lunch. We have SAOL Biog as well, which wasn't on the photo. But the SAOL Biog, what SAOL found is that women weren't able to access the addiction day centre because obviously they're the sole carers of their children, and so SAOL Biog was set up to allow women to provide childcare for women to access the service. So on that day, in 2023, there was 10 children aged 1 to 2 attended the Children's Project, and there were only 2 non-physical fights in arguments in the garden, during which time SAOL was being evaluated by a major funder. Just a regular day in SAOL. So we're asking, why a women's only addiction service? So we talk about in SAOL the bio, psycho, and social model of addiction. So again, those of you not familiar with this model, what in a simplistic fashion, I will explain it, that basically that there's psychological risk factors and there's biological risk factors to substance use problems. It's complex, and it's not one single factor causing the substance use issues. And today, I'm not going to get into all there are biological differences for women, physical health impacts, but today I'm going to focus on the social differences for women compared to men. Addiction is different for women. That is definitely our tagline in SAOL. So the sociological factors, one of the things is family influence. Women, more than men, are more influenced when there is substance use, alcohol misuse, substance use, misuse, drug misuse in their family homes. They are more likely then to have substance misuse problems. Parental influence is more of an influence on women rather than on girls, rather than boys as well. In addition, women compared to men are more influenced by their partner's use of drugs. They're more likely to associate drug use with romantic partners and friends compared to men. They're more likely to be introduced to drugs by a male partner. And they're more likely to live with a partner who is using drugs. And if their partner is using drugs, it's very difficult for a woman to abstain from their drug use or to reduce their drug use, because that influence partners can have on women's drug use. Criminal justice, women more than men are more likely to be prosecuted and imprisoned for minor drug offences. Women, because women, as we know, are in part-time roles, more likely to be in part-time jobs, more likely to be carers in society, or more likely to be living single parents and living in poverty in our society, which can keep them in that, harder for them to access treatment, harder for them to escape that cycle of addiction and poverty. With the caring role, what we see is that women are more, stigma is a massive thing for women who are using drugs compared to men. It's more of a stigma. It's more of a barrier for women who use drugs compared to men. And on top of that, if they're mothers, and that's that double stigma. And that's barrier to accessing treatment, because it's like, oh, you're a bad mother, you're using drugs. Instead, we say, no, you can still be a good mother and use drugs. And there's also, of course, that risk, that fear, which is a very real fear for women who use problematic drug use, is of child removal. There was a study done in 2022 that mothers are 6 times more likely to have children removed compared to fathers. 6 times more likely. In addition to that, women, obviously, women are more likely to have had experience of sexual violence, have experience of trauma. And on top of that, using drugs exposes you to more trauma, exposes women to more risk of sexual violence. And of course, why I'm here today is that women as well who use drugs are more vulnerable to domestic abuse. So just to bring it back to that random day in SAOL, and the child removal piece. SAOL women are mothers, right? There were 12 women for that morning group. 10 were mothers to 20 children aged 32 to 9 months. 3 of the women were mothers, sorry, I couldn't see there now, to 6 grandchildren. All 20 of the women's children have lived or do live in care or with other family. So you can imagine the trauma of that as well, being subjected to domestic abuse, using drugs and having your child removed, Sorry. And then back to that random day as well, just in terms of the domestic abuse and sexual violence, one woman felt safe in her home and her community and her home on that day. 11 said they felt unsafe in their area or at home. Violence, being called names, open drug dealing, and sexual violence were the main causes named for this lack of safety. And one woman said, though to be fair, I never really knew how unsafe I was until I started to feel safe. So more on the vulnerability of women who use drugs are more vulnerable to domestic abuse. I'll give you some statistics on that. So we know from the FRA, over 1 in 3 women in Ireland, 35%, have experienced physical or sexual or psychological abuse by an intimate partner. The UN Office of Drugs and Crime said women who use drugs experience gender-based violence at a rate at between 2 to 5 times the rate of the general population. So let's have a look at those statistics, or those stats there. If you multiply the maximum 5 by 35%, that's 175%, right? If you multiply 2 by 35%, that's 70% and a minimum. So at a minimum, 70% of women who use drugs are experiencing subjected to domestic abuse. And that tallies with other research out there, and with our random day at SAOL. Every woman who came to SAOL on that random day in 2023 was a survivor of domestic, sexual and gender-based violence. And all but one woman accessing an addiction service in Dublin reported an experience of intimate partner abuse. That was a Morton study in 2023. And obviously, why are women using drugs? We know in our domestic abuse services, women use drugs and they use alcohol to cope with the past, current trauma, abuse, or their physical pain, discomfort, or recent assaults. And of course, then drug use, alcohol use leads, as I said before, to more exposure of that trauma. So that's why we have Davina, we have SAOL, is that we recognize domestic abuse and addiction. They're not distinct social phenomena. We have to recognize the intersectional nature of domestic and substance use, and recognize also the linkages with mental ill health, poverty, and homelessness. And I love this quote of Audre Lorde. You'll always hear me quote this, because there's no such thing as a single issue. No such thing as a single issue struggle, because women do not live single issue lives. But unfortunately, our services, our society are not set up to that, and that's why SAOL is on a mission to adapt services response and to provide that unique service for women. So that's where we come in with the Davina. So the Davina Project was set up back in 2020, and it was set up initially because during COVID, the SAOL staff were going out to women's homes, and they were like, okay, actually, I didn't realize this woman was being subjected to coercive control, to abuse. She wasn't disclosing to us. And this is a place this woman said she feels safe, but she's not disclosing to us. What are we doing wrong here? And they realized they needed a specific service, a specific project for women being subjected to abuse and using substances. And how the Davina Project was set up, it was set up with experts by experience, what we used to call peer workers. There was 16 peer workers who developed the Davina manual and the project as a whole. And section 1 of the manual was what the Davina women wanted you as professionals to know. And section 2 is what they wanted women to know, like what they would have liked to have known, when they were going through their experiences. And it's a 10-module psychoeducational program for group work or individual work also. And it looks at types of abuse, safety planning, domestic abuse and the law, human rights, because often, I suppose that's really a really powerful module for women, their human rights, the law, because often women don't realize, because of that stigma, I'm an addict, I don't deserve anything, they don't realize the law is there for them to access as well. Mental health, it also looks at mental health, domestic abuse and children, the impacts on children, obviously a very sensitive and difficult module for women who have had their children removed. And also looking at services getting help. So this again is a very difficult module. It's one I delivered in the DOCUS, and I found it extremely challenging in a group because these are women who felt they never got the help when they asked for it. Because for women, particularly going through the criminal justice system, she's there getting her, she's going up, she's, going in to her, to do her sign on in the police station. And is this the same guard then that she can ask for help? It's tricky, it's complicated. And we also obviously look at boundaries and communication. There was an evaluation done of the Davina Project when it was done, and it was really, really interesting things came from that. One of the big things that came from the key learning was that the women were saying that, they felt there was a revolving door of services, that they were in and out of addiction, domestic abuse, all different services, and nowhere was meeting their needs to work on the dual issues of domestic abuse and addiction. I'll come back to that in a minute. The power again of that peer partnership, of talking, of being grouped with other women with the same lived experiences, was very powerful for women. What was really interesting was staff found that it transformed their everyday working approach. It changed the way they were having conversations with women about abuse. It gave them more confidence to have those conversations. And for women, naming it, having this specific group, that this is the Davina group, it happens this day every week, naming it dispelled that shame. And I really noticed that myself. It was very powerful when I joined SAOL, because what I noticed is that women were there, and women were coming into the welcome group, and other women were like, are you going to go into the Davina group? Yeah, it's every Wednesday. And everyone was just talking about it openly. This is a group about domestic abuse, but no one was ashamed. Everyone's talking about it. And it's like, this is there for you. We know this is happening to you. There's no shame there. You can access support. There was a report done then as well by UCD, a very powerful report by Mary Kennedy and others in 2023, a report examining whether human rights are negated for women in addiction when accessing domestic abuse support and refuge in Ireland. You can access that on the SAOL website. Needless to say, they did find women's human rights were negated. And what they found was a systemic state failure. The name of the reports, they said they couldn't take me because I was on drugs. What they found was the literature and the experience of the women from the report indicate that it was virtually impossible for women who are actively using substances to access refuge support. And what they say in the report also as well is that women in addiction are not consistently treated the same as other females when they seek domestic abuse support and refuge. There is an over-focus on abstinence, an over-focus on women being stable. What does that mean? How can someone be stable when they're using drugs and alcohol to cope with what they're going through? It's an entirely unfair thing to ask of women. And we see in other jurisdictions like the UK, they've set up specialist refuges for women who use drugs and are subjected to domestic abuse. We have someone from the Naya Refuge coming over to speak at our conference happening in November. So we see this quote here from one of the participants, and even in the clinic, the counsellor over there took a long, long time to see me because you had to kind of have a bit of stability. You had to be stable. How can you be stable with all this guilt and shame on your head? And we know where that guilt and shame is coming from. In addition, the addiction services, they've, again, a focus on the addiction. Often the bruises bruises or any injuries are seen to be perhaps due to injecting. or drug use, injuries from falling. I saw that in a particular domestic homicide review, one that I worked on, where a gay man was being brought in by his carer, who's also his abuser, and he kept having injuries. He had repeated injuries, but they kept saying, oh, that's because of his alcohol use. No one asked him the question about abuse. And I suppose what the report was saying, it wasn't laying the blame at the addiction and the domestic abuse services. What it was saying, it was a systemic state failure to recognise the need for dual education about domestic violence and addiction and service provision across a range of services and settings, and the absence of targeted domestic violence support and refuge services for women in addiction. So that's why projects like Davina are very important, and that's why Kuhn is supporting us. I suppose just some of the outcomes from the evaluation, which are quite interesting, is like, focusing more on women's addiction, more than their addiction, focusing on the abuse. What it said here, one of the unintended results that I've seen is that women who join the peer program have reduced their substance use, but they kind of naturally reduce the substance use because they don't dislike themselves as much, or they have more of an understanding of what they've been through, their trauma and stuff like that. Impact on sense of self-worth. I'll just quickly read that. We are important, we are loved, we're good mothers, and not just drug addicts. So the Davina, I'm nearly there now. It's like other outreach services out there. Provides one-to-one support. It does provide the group work, specific group work on addiction and domestic abuse. It does provide court accompaniment for women. Provide specific safety planning, because obviously there is different risks and risk factors and safety plan to look around a woman who uses drugs, perhaps her partner using drugs and alcohol as well. We also do signposting referral, and I have the stethoscope symbol there just to emphasize, that we know the impacts, and from my previous role in the maternity project, we know the impacts of domestic abuse on health. But also, if you're using drugs and alcohol as well, the combination of that, those two things, women that we work with, there's lots of health issues, very serious health issues, and a big part of SAOL is having health advocacy and supporting women to access the health support that they need. I suppose just a little plug on our training. Why is it unique? Because it's an intersection of substance use and domestic abuse. Not every, that intersection, as we know that they're talking about that, and of course mental ill health and poverty, that's all part of our training. We recognize there's no single issue. We present you with the Davina model, a trauma-informed best practice response to women using substances and subjected to domestic abuse. All our training, all our manuals are collaborated with experts through their experience, called the Davina Eves. So thank you very much. That was a whistle-stop tour through it all. And if you want more information, obviously, to make a referral to Davina, contact Rachel Fain at davina@saolproject.ie. And for training inquiries, you can contact myself directly. I am taking organizational inquiries, and there will be individual. Our current individual training has a wait list at the moment that you can join, but we will be doing more individual open sessions in 2026. But obviously as well, your organization can approach us for a training. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Gillian. That was a really informative presentation. Thanks again. Just to let you know that this week's Lunch and Learn recording is available in the Lunch and Learn section of the Community of Practice, where you can comment on the session itself and share your thoughts. Our domestic, sexual and gender-based abuse virtual community practice is a networking and knowledge sharing platform. And for anyone who isn't a member and would like to join, you can express your interest by emailing training@havenhorizons.com. You can also keep up to date by following Haven Horizons on our social media platforms or visiting our website.